Hi, and welcome back to Verity Babs Art, where I talk to my friends about art. Today, I'm so excited. I'm talking to the incredible freestyle rapper and comedian Chris Turner. We talk about Magritte, and we talk about the concept of originality, and we talk about buying art, and I hope you enjoy it. I'm here with Chris Turner. Chris, please give us an introduction to you.
Hello. Well, I was born in Manchester in 1989, and since then, so many things have happened. I'm a comedian, and I also do freestyle rap. Those are the two things that I'm known for. What I'm less known for is being a loving husband and owner of a fantastic cat called Colonel Widdershins. That's me. That's my potted life history.
The end. Join us next
Exactly.
Monday.
Yeah, it'll fit on a gravestone, and that's all we really need.
I'm really excited to have you on the video. I
On the
guess that's
video. Yeah.
on the video.
You just send this round to your friends, right? This is just like you put it in the family WhatsApp and they're like, "That's nice, Verity."
It's just for me. It's for personal use.
It just goes on a shelf. Just put it on a VHS, just slide it away. Just there we go. I've collected it.
A memory stick that's in the bottom of a shoe. We are going to start today by talking about Empire of Light by Magritte. Why don't you start by telling me, why you picked
Oh,
it, where you came across it?
why? Well, look, it's behind me here. I
I
mean,
know
one.
it's behind you.
Look, what's important is to remember, Verity. It's not just one painting. And Empire of Light, or as it could be translated, Dominion of Light, it was painted many times by René Magritte in his life. So why I chose it, and I guess we can get into the weeds later on, is I I'm a big fan of art. I love art. I try and get involved in. I don't make it, right. I don't paint or draw or sculpt or do anything. But whenever I'm in a city, which I'm often in because the countryside is vile, whenever I'm in a city doing a show, I will go and wander around a museum. And I can eat up a couple of hours in a museum. I'm not one of those hardcore people that's like, look, I can spend half a day, or I need to go back over the course of 2 days. But I like museums, and I was in Brussels for the first time years ago. I don't even know when this was, maybe like 2009, and that's where Magritte. I guess I don't know if he lived or is from, but his museum is there. And I went in, and I was like, this guy is off his rocker. Everything in that museum was funny and weird and a joke. And this particular painting, one of which is there, this was my favorite one. And I've been trying to think why.
Mhm.
I think it's because to me, it feels like the only serious one that he did, because all of his stuff is so funny or just weird. It's all very surreal. The elevator shaft of that museum is really cool. You get in the elevator, or lift, sorry. I live in America now, so I don't use right words. But you get into it, and there's a window in the side of the elevator, and there's a little Belgian boy in there, and he's like, "Hello, welcome to the René Magritte Museum." But that's not his accent. Hello, welcome to the René Magritte Museum. If you look out the window, you will see in the shaft are paintings that Magritte did. And so, like, you look out this little window, and against the wall is a painting of a foot.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go up, and it's a painting of like a knee. And then he goes up again. He's like, little ones might want to look away. And you go up, and it's just a full pubic region with bush. And then you go up again, and it's a boob, just one. And then you go up again, and you get a face, and it's apparently his wife. And I was like, this museum's great. But this painting I saw, and I was like, the thing I liked the most about it was when you first see it, or when I first saw it, I didn't know why it was weird. I was like, oh, that's a strange painting. Why is it making me feel weird? And then you realize it's because it's the sky in the day and the street in the night. And I just thought, oh, that's good. And look, I'm not saying it's a brilliant, mind-blowing painting. And I think this is his, like, it's a famous painting, but it's not his most famous painting. Like, everyone knows the apple in the face one, which is cool. And the pipe, ceci ne pas un pipe, which is also cool. Like, that's really fun. as a comedian, it's very easy to just go, oh, these funny things. Whereas I like to think of myself as a serious performer, actually, speaking harsh truths to power.
Well, that's what you're doing here. It was interesting you choosing this one because it is just like one of his most normal works. When you see Magritte and you know it's Magritte, your first instinct is to be like, where's the weird bit? And actually, it's quite nice for you to have been struck by this first as a sort of painting in its own right, rather than as one of Magritte's little pranks. It's quite nice. This is just a really nice emotional painting, and then you're like, and he's done the clever thing. Well done, Magritte.
Yeah, I read something about it being, he was like, oh, this is poetry, which I don't know how many of his other paintings could be construed as that, because it is, a lot of the other stuff is just trickery. One of my favorite ones, it's either in LA or New York, it's the painting of like the train coming out of the fireplace. He painted it, and he, like, the guy he painted it for, and it's this weird tension between like artists and patrons. Like, 'cause I feel this, like, at the moment I'm making a lot of custom wraps in quarantine with people. Companies are like, hey, can you do a wrap for us about this? And I'm like, yeah. And then afterwards they'll give me all these instructions of how to edit it and what they want in it. And I'm like, oh, you've made this video not as good as I would have made it if I had the control. And so I kind of feel this, but I think he specified, like, it has to be put in this specific place because the angle I've painted the train will make it look like it's coming out the wall when people are coming down the stairs of your house. Like, that's why I've done it like this. And the guy was like, nah, and then just put it in a completely different place. And I think I really like that. It's the one thing I wanted to talk about on this. I was like, oh, maybe we can talk about one of my favorite art moments. This is just a total side note. When I was in Nice, I went to the Picasso Museum, which the Picasso Museum in Nice is real good because I guess he lived there or is, whatever. But the first few rooms in that museum are like just all when he's like a kid. He's like 11 years old. And the paintings are really good. Like, if someone said my child did this, you were like, oh yeah, whatever. They're really good, realistic paintings. And you see one, there's like one of the Pope or something. It's like a really good painting. And then he had a patron who was like, could you do a portrait of me? And then you see the portrait and looks nothing like a person. It's clearly when he's gone like, I'm going to experiment. And he was like, I don't know, 13 or something. And I really like that someone said, hey, Picasso, here's some money, do a picture of me. I really like the ones you've been doing. And he's just like, blah, 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 blah. Your face is on your ass. And that thing of like, thank you, Picasso. That's exactly what I wanted.
The story of Gertrude Stein, I think, was asked Picasso to do a portrait of her. And she sees the finished product and she's like, this looks nothing like me. And he's like, it will do. So this idea that when Picasso becomes the master of art, people will see it and be like, okay, that is Gertrude Stein because Picasso says it. This idea that like it will be.
I thought it was a sick burn. I thought it was him being like, no, your face is going to end up looking like this.
something bad's going to happen. I think that is what you're saying about artist ownership, basically, about where your creative process ends and eventually the buyer comes in. Because a lot of fine artists, or contemporary fine artists certainly, struggle with this idea of, I've made this thing, I've toiled over it, it's my idea, and potentially I've worked on it for years, and blood, sweat and tears, and then you sell it, and that can be a very hard process, and then you have nothing more to do with it. And someone who creates content that's out there in the world, in the internet, do you feel that same sort of ownership?
Yeah, there's that thing of you're creating. I stand by the kind of create the things that you would want to watch. So everything I create and put out is something that I'm making for myself when it's under my control. So like my YouTube channel or whatever. But obviously I have to make a living. And so when I'm making videos for people, I'll make stuff. And if they're like, and I've worked on stuff where I've submitted a script for it and then they've gone, great, we're just going to change it. And it comes back and there's no jokes in it and everything's been changed. And you're like, well, they are paying me, so I have to do it. And weirdly, a lot of the stuff there's been a lot of stuff that I've done that's fun. And I've been like, that was cool. We've made it. Everyone's been paid. And then they've just never put it out, which is the thing that happens in like performance world. Like, in Hollywood, everyone's buying scripts and then only 10% of those are ever going to get made, or even less, a smaller percentage. And there's so much stuff. I'm like, oh, I'm really proud of that. And then no one ever gets to see it. And it's that thing of like, you can't let people see it because they've contracted you for it. And then the stuff that you do that is released, you're like, no, that looks a bit rubbish. The commercialism thing, I kind of wanted to talk about this painting in reaction to that. It was only when I kind of mentioned this and then I looked into it a bit more. I didn't realize why there were so many of these paintings. And it is apparently because this was exhibited at some big art show. And this is like the one painting. Like, so the original one I think is like quite tall and it's like a portrait, whereas a lot of them are landscape. Mm-hmm. And it was promised to 3 or 4 different buyers. They were like, I want this. Like, yeah, you can buy it. And then I think it was Peggy Guggenheim, which I don't know which Guggenheim it was that I've seen the painting in, but it's in one of them, whether that's here or in Venice or somewhere. But she ended up buying it. And so there were 3 other buyers who were like, hey, where's our painting? And so Magritte was like, oh, don't worry, I'll paint you all one. So he painted 3 more that were all different. He's like, there you go, you each get one. Yeah, it wasn't intended to be a series. He just made 4 because that was the demand. And then suddenly people were like, oh, I want them. And he's like, well, actually, I quite enjoy painting this. And each one's a different house and a different, perspective. And so he started making more and more and more. And the painting he was painting when he died was one of these.
Wow.
So that was on his easel when he died. Because he painted in his house. He was a bloody lockdown painter. Made everything in his kitchen or in his dining room, which I think is super cool for what's happening now. Like, we're all making art in our homes.
At the time of recording, we're week 7 or 8 into lockdown. The idea that he stays indoors and makes his stuff, when you look at the stuff he makes, which is an easel painting of a picture of the seaside, they're all outdoor scenes. I don't know, it's interesting that he's doing all of those inside. Him making more than one brings up this idea of the importance of the original. And that comes up a lot in terms of things like pricing. So when something is a print, or if it's like, if you see in a gallery where it's like after Magritte, he didn't necessarily make it, or he maybe said to someone, it's okay for you to copy this and sell it, or potentially he did make it but just not officially for a patron, so it's still after Magritte, but he did do it. So there is this really complex thing of an original is worth so much more than a copy, even though the copy is still by him of a different house.
Yeah, I'm sitting on my desk underneath a painting which is a copy of a painting. It's such a badly done painting, and everyone on it looks kind of fatter than they should be. And it's only when I realized it was a copy, because it says in the corner, it's like E. Jespersen, copy E. L. Juxen. And so I just thought it was like, that's Danish. Oh, it's probably Copenhagen. That's what it's like. E. Jespersen from Copenhagen, L. Juxen, oh, I don't know, Young or something.
Yeah.
So, but then I looked it up, and the painting I've got is like, it's like a long painting, whereas the original is this. And so what's happened is the guy's just stretched it, and so he's just made everyone fatter. Their faces look stupid. But then when you look at the original, there's bits on this that aren't in the original because the scene has been elongated. So it's actually the bits at the edges where the painting is better than the bits in the middle, where he's actually having to make stuff up. Is cool. Like, his own original stuff is cooler than when he's copying someone. Also, this is a fun thing. One of the things that my wife Alice, who we both know, it'd be weird if I didn't. We were in a museum and there was a Rembrandt, and we saw this painting, and it was like, it's an old man, but it's not a Rembrandt, right? It was Rembrandt's studio, and Rembrandt painted the hand. That's all he did. So you look at the painting, and the hand is insanely good. It's literally just this, and it's so detailed and so wrinkled and great and brilliant. Like, wow. And then you look at the rest of the painting, and it's fine. And it's really cool to see that comparison. Like, he did the hand and was like, yeah, you finish this off. And you because if you just saw that painting, you'd be like, oh, that's good. That looks like a Rembrandt. But then you see Rembrandt in it, and then someone else, and you're like, oh no, you can clearly tell that's why he's great, and that's why this person is a good painter, but not,
Actually, how stressful that would be if you were like 16-year-old work experience to Rembrandt, he was like, just finish this off. Talking about this, like, the small part that Rembrandt did that makes it a Rembrandt. It's a big thing that I suppose that issue had a resurgence with people like with Warhol, where how much of the screen print or painting does Warhol have to have touched for it to be a Warhol? Does it matter if he didn't touch it at all? And people like Hearst, who obviously have other people helping him paint all the circles, how many of them had to be done by him for them to sort of count? And I'm not so sure whether that matters, especially with works that are sort of, Warhol obviously is doing this thing where it's like the whole point is I'm mass producing something that looks mass produced. I'm telling you it's art. And I guess with Hirst, it's sort of more of a conceptual thing. But do you think that matters?
So I'm to relate everything back to my job, but as a comic, a big thing for us is like I'll quote someone something, and sometimes people go, "Wait, that much? Wait, how is it that much to do 20 minutes?" And you're like, "Well, it's because for corporate gigs, right? You do get you per charge a lot." And then you have to kind of explain to them, well, you're not paying for 20 minutes. You're paying for 10 years of me getting to the stage when I can do this. And you're paying for my experience as a performer and being able to advise you as how to make the show well and how, the safe pair of handsness of it. So what you're paying for is not just the product. You're paying for the whole thing leading up to that. And I guess with these kind of instances, that's how I kind of look at it. Like, well, no, you're paying for the artist's thought. You're paying for the artist's creation, I think, in that sense. And obviously there is a stage when you can just, literally be so famous, you just sign the corner of the work and you didn't make it at all. I mean, having said that, like, obviously I still have thoughts on like, I would, like, one of my favorite paintings is, what the fuck, a Whistle Jacket, the big horse one on a beige background, and he's like rearing up. There's no background. It looks unfinished, and when it's huge. I think it's either in London or Manchester. But when they exhibited it, people were like, "You haven't finished this painting," and he's like, "No, that's the whole thing." And I think it's so bloody cool. It's really cool. I would love that painting. Now I looked into it and I was like, okay, can you get people to paint copies of original paintings? And you can, right? There's like a company in China that just have a huge warehouse, and it's full of artists, and they're fine artists, they've got degrees, whatever, and they're just painting. You ask them to paint a picture, they'll do you the Mona Lisa. Now, obviously, if someone came into your house and was like, "Oh, you got the Mona Lisa," they know it's not that. With this big horse painting, I'm pretty sure not many people would recognize that painting anyway. They'd be like, "Wow, what a cool painting." Would I want it for, like, say they charge, for a full-size one, 10 grand or whatever? Would I want it knowing it wasn't real? And it's then that question of, well, are you valuing the aesthetic qualities or the fact that you have a real work of art? And I don't know where I fall on that. I mean, I wouldn't drop 10 grand on a massive painting of a horse, but
you could ask them if you could pay slightly less for a slightly less good horse. I'll pay 300 quid and it can have 3 legs. Like, we'll just work with that.
I'll then say it's a Magritte version. I'll be like, "What's weird about this painting? It's a tripod horse."
So are you at a point where you are buying artworks for your home?
We're very fortunate to have a lot of art in this house. Like, over there is a massive painting in a gold frame of King Canute, and it's really cool, and I love having it. I don't think any art in this house is ours. It is all my wife's mother, and they're all originals, but they're all ones that she bought when she was young in thrift stores, in charity shops. Like, there's one over our fireplace that whenever I do a live stream without like a screen up, people go, "What's that painting?" Because it's a painting of a woman holding a framed painting, like, and she's like looking over her shoulder like she's about to put it up. And I really like that.
That's pretty Magritte-esque in terms of...
Yeah, it kind of is. I haven't bought art for quite a while. When I lived in Oxford, I did buy quite a lot of art. So I do have a couple of things that I really like, but they're at my parents' house. My favorite thing I own is a guy called Matthew J. Smith. He's a ceramicist, right? I think he had a residency at the V&A, and what he does is kind of like a queer take on like heritage items. So he teamed up with the National Trust, and what he did was he kind of would just make copies of things that were in the National Trust houses. So like some candlesticks, but then he'd like change them a little bit. So rather than this silver ornate thing, it would have like, I don't know, some kind of like just some weird things. Like, and you probably wouldn't notice it a lot of the time. But he did a series. He took tapestries and needlework. And that's one of the things I loved in Oxford. It was just, I bought it again from China. It was super cheap. It was a reproduction of the Lady and the Unicorn tapestry, which is like a famous French tapestry, and it's very, very beautiful and nice. I had that, but so I really like tapestries. But he took these needlework pieces that were often made by anonymous women, and he would then just unstitch any character in them and replace it with like just colored thread. So you look at this picture and you'd be like, oh, why has that boy got no face? It's just like a blue color where his face would be. But he did a triptych, which I bought and I love it. And it's quite big. It's like 3 individual tapestries, and the middle one is a country scene in the forest, and there's 2 shapes, pink and purple, one where a stag would be and one where a deer, lady deer, a doe would be. And then the 2 other pieces are smaller. One is like a banqueting hall and one is an entrance hall of a stately home. And he's just stitched the animals back into them. So it's like there's a stag at the bottom of the stairs being like, I'm a stag. And then there's a doe on this table. And I really like them. And I think the reason I like them is because they just look like normal needlework. You look at them and you go, oh, that's cool. But then you realize, wait, why is there a deer in there? And then you look at the main one, oh, it's because they were there. And also the fact that must have taken bloody hours to restitch everything from one into the other. And I like that idea of work has gone into this. Like that piece contains hours of labor. And I think that's something I really like.
I think you can have this feeling where you're like, I really respect the fact that this has taken ages and this has been really difficult. But then also I super respect how ballsy it is for, Warhol and Hearst and all of these kind of the big boys being like, I just sign the corner. I think that's quite fun to have both those things kind of coexisting.
At the moment, I'm working on developing merchandise for my fans, right? People are like, hey, we'd love to buy your catchphrase on a t-shirt, because I've got a catchphrase, Verity, and it's "that's art." So don't try and trademark that.
Is it?
No, it's not. It's what I frequently say when anyone criticizes my show. I'm like, I think you find that's art. No, one thing I care about is if I'm selling things to people who like what I do, I want them to be good. I don't want to just be like, oh, here's a cheap t-shirt that we've printed some shit on. I want it to be like well-made products, and that's why it's taken a while to source it, because we're trying to get good stuff. But that's a similar thing. Like, people are buying it to support you, but also because they kind of want your name on them somewhere. They're like, I want to demonstrate to people that I like this person. Like, you wear a band t-shirt not because you like the cover art of the album that it is, but you buy it because you're like, I'm a fan of this. I mean, there must be so many people who own a work of art by an artist that is not their favorite piece of art, right? You can't own this Dali, but you can own like this tiny little Dali and then you're like, hey, I own a Dali.
Yeah.
Because I was in someone's house and I was like, is this a Dali? And they're like, oh yeah. I was like, that's fucking awesome.
I remember being in someone's house, a friend of my mum's, I was staying over there, and I went downstairs, like, oh look, they've got a print of a Paul Arago, and then I looked close, was like, no, that's a Paul Arago. Alrighty then. Be more careful when walking about the house. Now, obviously, in lockdown is an interesting time for that, because there is this big thing on Instagram of the artist support pledge, which is where fine artists basically are selling some works, selection of works, for £200 or under. And the plan is that basically once they have earned £1,000 from selling these works, they will then buy someone else's work. So it sort of carries on through. Obviously, you could try and find artists who are otherwise out of your price range and really swoop in on that, and maybe not get something you particularly like from them, but it is by them. Or it could be a really interesting time to support emerging artists. But I think the art worlds, and probably all sorts of creative fields, are just suited to having a few big dogs that everyone adores. There sort of isn't enough. It's a very strange hierarchy, the art world, and who is respected or not, because Instagram means that you have access to thousands upon thousands of artists, but that doesn't mean that everyone gets the platform space that they deserve.
Yeah, I went to it was like a kind of gallery tour in the sense that it's one of the big entertainment firms here. Their offices, they have 4 floors. And they teamed up with Stefan Simkovits, who's this kind of big guy in the art world. And his company, and he just said this, like, it was just like he was just walking around just telling us all this stuff. And he was charming and lovely and wonderful. they find an artist they like and they buy all of their work, and then they keep them for 20 years, and then he's going to sell them. And people were like, I think some people are like, this is a bit naughty. He's like, no, I genuinely love these artists, and I give them all this money, and they can then be an artist. But then and this is his big point. He's like, we do put this art out. It's not in museums, it's in public spaces. Public spaces being, so this office, they have 4 floors, and there is so much art. Literally every space on every floor has art on, and every 6 months they change it. And each floor has a different theme, and he like works with a lot of, one of the floors was just artists from mainly South Africa, where they can't get traditional art materials, so they're making it with like jerry can handles and melted rope, and some of these things were bloody spectacular. And he's just walking us around. He's like, look, thousands and thousands of people see these every day. All the clients coming in, people doing business. If you're in a museum, everyone coming through the door, the museums had to pay like an advertising budget to get them in. This is a much more democratic way of seeing art. Like, you're in the building and you see it. These artists get more eyes on them, blah, 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 blah. And then you could buy the work, but I own it all, so I'll sell you it, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, he's like talking about, he'd show you a sculpture and be like, and obviously, you know, if you can buy one of these sculptures from me. And through that, like, I kind of found out about a couple of artists that I really liked. There's a guy called Singer Sampson who does these awesome self-portraits, which are just like very, very cool. Like, when you're in a museum, obviously you're not discovering artists, because if to get in a museum, they're big, or at least, you know, the museums in like LA where it's all kind of big stuff. Whereas like these kind of weird little collections, you're discovering people. When you're in a museum, the power a piece is given by virtue of it being by a famous artist, right? That's the always thing. And so, like, you know, you walk around the museum walls and you go, oh, that's a name I recognize. Oh, this is very good. You're like, well, no, if it said someone else's name, would you think it was good?
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things I love about my wife is that she's very much not like that. She's just, she was like, I don't like this. This is, I'm like, but this is this seminal artist. She's like, no, they're bad.
And I respect that. I think the idea that art is sacred, sometimes you've got to be like, it's a bit crap. And it is interesting. I think that is a thing that all artists sort of have to tackle. Had to tackle with that since, you know, since the Industrial Revolution, if not before. But this idea that you can either sort of sell your work to big pharma or you know, a bank or one of these massive institutions and have them in their offices. And that might not be what you kind of expected being an artist to be, because you want it to be about, you know, it's about the art, about heart and this kind of thing. Whereas actually at the end of the day, if that means that your art is being seen by people and you're being paid for it, obviously that's better than not selling it at all. So it's just this difficult thing of trying to work it out.
It's the same with comedy, right? It's the corporate gigs that I charge, you know, 20 minutes at a corporate is just so much more fee than 20 minutes at a comedy club. But what I care about is the 20 minutes at a comedy club. Like, that's the type of show that goes well for me, and I can have fun and experiment. Now, the corporate stuff you have to do, but then I've always, you know, when I lived in Oxford, I spent like 3 years just doing corporates, and I really did very few comedy clubs, or compared to how many I used to do or how many I do now, because I was like, if I earn all this corporate money, I can then put that into Edinburgh shows. And a big part of my Edinburgh show has always been my artwork. I commission art for my posters. And I would always spend quite a lot of money on that because, one, I get a poster, and two, I also get some art. Like, I get the piece, right? That, for me, is how I've always balanced it. By earning money, by doing the kind of stuff I don't want to do, corporate gigs, I then can put the money onto, a tour to Australia that might make money, but it might not. Yeah, I imagine that that's what everyone has to do, right? Like, a musician has to, you know, their song that they love that's about, like, their heartbreak, and then they sell it for the John Lewis commercial. Yeah. I mean, I know that's not how it works anymore. They bloody commission it, but that kind of thing where you're like, okay, I didn't think this was going to be this advertising jingle, but then that lets you buy studio time where you can make the album that you wanted to make or whatever.
I've worked with a really incredible artist called Fionn Gunn, and she also often paints pictures which have her grandchildren in. And there is that sentimental thing where if I sell this on, you know, this is a very personal thing, and creating art is super personal, but at a certain point you do have to sort of take that money to be able to carry on your practice. Chris, this has been so brilliant. Can you just let us know where we can follow you, see you, all of that?
Yeah, well, you can't see me at any point soon because comedy is definitely going to be the last thing to ever return. The main place to find me and where I'm still updating content is on YouTube, which if you search Chris Turner or Chris Turner Comedy or Chris Turner Rap, then I come up on there. And then my little Instagram, which is a lot smaller, but as lovingly curated, is Chris Turner Comedy. And yeah, if you ever want to see me live, then just keep an eye on my website, and I put my tour dates there. Although everyone keeps being like, hey, you got tour dates up. Are you actually going to be in these places? I'm like, well, if there was any government guidance as to whether I could be, then I'd let you know. So yeah. And if you ever want to, go and see a Magritte at a museum and have me go, look, the sky is the daytime, but the street's the night, then always welcome.
Thanks so much for watching. Please do share, like, etc. You can follow Chris in the ways written below, and you can follow me on Instagram at VerityBabsArt. And I'll see you next Monday.